In this video, we're going to be walking through a complete nutrition guide for footballers the day before, the day of, and the day after a game day with our Health and Science Communication Officer, Patrick Elliott. This video is sponsored by Mass Plus by Messi, who I am a brand ambassador for and who are close friends of us at Training One-to-One. Let's get straight into the value. Firstly, looking at the day before a game, what should we be focusing on as athletes?
As athletes, carb-rich diet, so carbohydrate-rich diet is very important for your whole week, but particularly the day before a match. The reason for that is because carbohydrates are the fuel that our body likes to use to create energy, and they facilitate high performance in an exercise context. Carb-rich diet, we want to kind of keep the protein relatively moderate and the fat content of the entire diet a little bit lower. In terms of hydration, then, general guide is to sip water throughout the day, probably reaching about 2 litres throughout the day, conscious that, you do get water through food as well.
So, breakfast. First meal of the day.
Yeah, it'll vary to people's preferences, but it could be something like a bowl of porridge, the oats high in carbs, some fruit, maybe a glass of orange juice on the side. That's always a good shout. Also a healthy meal as well. For other people, maybe that's not their thing. You could do toast with some jam, maybe some peanut butter to make it a bit more palatable. Other than that, you could have a smoothie, a loaded smoothie, maybe again with some orange juice in it or orange juice on the side. But really the key here is to get those carbs on board, especially when you have time in the morning, most people, to kind of get something good on board. After the breakfast, some people like a mid-morning snack. That'll again depend on preference. Could be a cereal bar, could be rice cakes with a bit of maple syrup or a bit of jam. Could also be toast if you're at home, working at home. And snacks can kind of be plugged in throughout the day depending on someone's preference.
Everyone's lives are different as well. If you're preparing for a game day and you're an amateur athlete, you could be in work, you could be in college, you could be anything.
Absolutely.
The preferences are all different.
Yeah, so mid-morning, afternoon, evening snack, you just want to make sure they're contributing to that total daily intake of food that you need, particularly focused on carbs. So lunch then, you're looking at, again, could be sandwiches. Bread is also, it's a very good source of carbohydrates. You could use some hummus, some falafel there. You're getting extra carbs, a bit of protein, some vegetables for overall micronutrients and vitamins and minerals and all that sort of stuff. You could do a hot lunch. You could do a burrito, kind of loading in some rice and some beans, get some more carbohydrates on board. And then dinner could be a curry with rice. I would say keep it, the spice level quite contained because you don't want to upset your stomach for your match the next day. But other than that, it could be potatoes, roast potatoes, with some sort of meat or plant-based protein source. Kind of typical dinners, spaghetti bolognese, just to get that carb portion on board again. And
then for meats, for example, would you prefer poultry, so chicken, as opposed to a red meat?
Yeah, I think it's probably lighter on the stomach, which can play a role with digestion. You just want to keep things running very smoothly the night before a game.
Looking at game day itself, there's obviously a lot of key considerations. So just to make things easier for the video, we're going to look at a 3 p.m. kickoff. We understand that players from all over the world are going to be watching this. So everyone has different preferences. You're going to be playing at different times, different days. And it's obviously not always going to be the same thing. So just to make things easier, we're going to look strictly for this video at a 3 p.m. kickoff. But we're going to outline everything in an article, aren't we?
Yep. So we'll have general overview of how to eat before a match in this video, and the more nitty-gritty kind of details, how many grams of carbs and all that sort of stuff, will be available in the article in the description.
So with our 3 p.m. kickoff, timing is super important.
Yeah, because you have to understand that you want to get a good amount of food on board, carbohydrates, prior to that to give yourself time to digest it. So you need to be kind of up and at it. For that 3 p.m. kickoff, depending on someone's preference, what time they get up at, breakfast between 7 and 9, that kind of range is pretty good. Again, we want to focus on carbohydrates here, a high carbohydrate meal, but also low in fiber. So porridge and oats is probably not the best option. Some people still do that on match day and it's fine, but for most people, maybe a cereal would be a better option. Toast would be a better option with some maybe honey or maple syrup or even jam. Maybe some fruit juice on the side. So they're the sort of options, even a banana as well. Just to give yourself that kind of good start, get those muscles full of carbs because the muscles use those carbs to create energy when you're playing and to ensure you play your best. So breakfast, as I said, 7 to 9. Before the match, you want to, about 3 hours before, have your pre-match meal. Let's say 2 to 4 hours before, because people's schedules will vary.
Of course.
But if we're 3 o'clock, that means you're probably 11, 12 or thereabouts. And again, this is kind of a bigger carb-rich meal. Focuses on things that you tolerate well. You know, you don't want to try a new food on match day that you don't usually eat. So simple carbs, bagels, fruits that you tolerate very well, like bananas and things like that, apples, fruit juices. You can even have shake, like a protein shake, but with a good amount of carbs in it. And that sort of thing is kind of what you're looking at in that pre-match meal.
Yeah.
Some people do like a pasta or sandwiches and things like that, but I'm just conscious that kind of time in the morning, it's usually more simple foods. But this is, again, open to interpretation on the individual's part, and if someone's eating in the evening, that might be more applicable to them, if that makes sense.
Of course, everyone's, again, we're looking at 3 p.m. kickoff, so that makes total sense. Like I said, we'll outline everything in the article, so there's no worries there. When you get to now, we've had our pre-match meal, now we're either travelling to the game or we're in the changing room or we're walking the pitch. Is there considerations? Again, we see a lot of players with caffeine sources. What would be your input? But what do you think is good there?
60 minutes prior to the match is the recommendation to take caffeine. If you're someone who tolerates it, there are people who don't tolerate caffeine. So again, individual context is important here. But yeah, within 60 minutes, you want to take some caffeine. I think caffeine pills and gums are the best way to go, because you can accurately know how much you're taking.
Yeah. And,
you know, it's not going to really upset your stomach the same way maybe 2 or 3 coffees would, or an energy drink might, particularly if it's carbonated, so if it's fizzy. So that would be the recommendation there. And again, for specifics on how much you need to take, we'll list that in the article for people to look at. Other than that, you kind of want to, just before the match kicks off, 5-10 minutes before, you want to have about 200 mils of water, just to get that final bit of hydration on board, or even kind of hydration drink. Yeah. So that'll just give you that buffer of hydration before you start the match.
Yeah. And then halftime, what are you taking on board?
You often see at matches, even Sunday League or whatever, people eating the orange slices. Yeah. So that's
proper old school.
That's Sunday League, all right. So the idea there is, again, I'll be blue in the face saying this, but carbohydrates, but also there's a bit of hydration in the fruit because it's the juice. So that could be an option. Dried fruit, some raisins could be an option. I mean, even sweets, kind of like candy or whatever.
Just a quick energy source.
Yeah, could be an option. And then, a sports drink or a hydration drink could also be an option, particularly if it's very hot, if you're sweating a lot, and also if you're a heavy sweater. So some people sweat more than others, so they lose more sodium through their sweat.
Yes.
So, or electrolytes, as people call it. So that's when you can kind of replenish that at halftime, but then also after the match.
Sorry for interrupting, but this is the exact moment in a game where a bottle of Mass Plus by Messi is perfect for helping you. It is designed for fast hydration. It is loaded with electrolytes and doesn't sit heavy in the stomach, so it is perfect for maybe halftime in a game or post-game hydration. So make sure to pick up a bottle and give it a try before your next training session or game day. Game's done. Obviously, your involvement in the game will have repercussions as well. If I've only played 20 minutes, my recovery might look different, and especially if I haven't played yet, my halftime is obviously going to look different. But this is just presuming someone's played at least 70 to 90 minutes, let's say roughly. So straight after the game, input.
Okay. First 30 minutes, I'm going to say it again, carbohydrates. You want about 0.7 grams for every kilogram of your body weight. Okay. If you're 60 kilogram, that's about 42 grams, or I think thereabouts. So that's a banana and a half, or 2 small bananas. It's, maybe a cereal bar and a small apple. It's something like that on board. Could also maybe come through a sports drink or something else. And then you want to obviously rehydrate. Again, hydration drink could be useful here. Water could be useful here, and depends on the individual, how much they've sweated and that sort of thing. Within 2 hours then, so 90 minutes after that kind of first 30 minutes, you want to get a proper meal on board. Yeah. What I mean by a proper meal is a meal that balances carbohydrates, protein, and a little bit of fat. And you want to start to focus now, in this post-game process on these kind of healthier foods that can help with that anti-inflammatory response as well. And this is just good practice for healthy diets anyway, but these are, things like vegetables. You want some fruits, some berries. There's some evidence there that those antioxidants in those fruits can actually enhance that recovery process. But that's a good recommendation for anyone anyway. But you want to get that on board. Again, some protein, it could be chicken, it could be tofu, it could be another source, it could be fish, just to get that protein back in. And your carb sources, I've talked about them already. rice, pasta, bread, burritos, whatever.
Yeah, cool. Makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
So we're into the next day, post-game day. Hopefully, players, athletes would have had a good dinner or a good meal the night before, and then hopefully some rest. We know some players struggle to have a clean sleep because the adrenaline is so high, but generally with a 3 p.m. kickoff, it gives you enough time to kind of ease off towards in the evening and after you've eaten, again, kind of decompress. So the next 24 hours, how do they look?
Kind of actually what you mentioned about the sleep, you know, sometimes we have that cortisol, elevated adrenaline, we're not really going to sleep very well. Obviously we want to sleep for recovery, so, you know, mindfully we want to sleep well generally, but don't beat yourself up too much over that. But it does underscore the fact that the next day is an opportunity to repair and recover, and a lot of that comes through your nutrition. So it's kind of like what I talked about earlier for the day before the game. It is, you know, the focus is on carbohydrates, but not to the exclusion of your other macronutrients, so your protein, your fat. So it's getting those kind of balanced meals on board, breakfast, lunch, dinner. You do want to put that carbohydrate back into your muscle because it's been used in that match. So you want to get it back in. We're talking rice and pasta and those sort of dishes, but obviously with some healthy vegetables, hopefully some fruits throughout the day. You know, you don't have to be too strict. I don't want to come off as everything has to be whole food based. Yeah. You know, sometimes there is a place for junk foods or chocolate or sugary things because, you know, think of an 80-20 principle maybe. 80% of the time you're eating whole foods, 20%, you need to get these other foods on board sometimes to meet your energy requirements. So that can come into it here as well. But generally speaking, you know, protein sources, meats, some plant-based proteins, beans and lentils can come into it, fish, depending on your dietary preferences, some leafy greens, you know, which people don't tend to eat in Ireland too much or kind of anywhere, some fruits, some berries. That would be great to kind of get all those on board throughout that day. And kind of consistent meals, breakfast, lunch, dinner, add some snacks in as you wish.
It's important to remember that we're very aware the majority of players watching this are amateurs. Amateur footballers, amateur athletes. Things like this can be very difficult to stay on top of. This is just a really good guideline, and not only just for sport, but just for general well-being, general health. If you consider the day before, day of, day after a game, if you can nail 3 really good days of nutrition and hydration, you're better off than a lot of people. Like, to really taking care of yourself, plus getting activity on top of that, there's just nothing but benefits that are going to come from it.
Absolutely, yeah. And these principles we're talking about throughout these 3 days, you know, they do carry over to the rest of your diet. So just if you're thinking about what to eat and stuff, some of the things we talked about today can kind of guide your general diet. I will say again, you know, we understand, and I'm certainly not perfect at my nutrition or anything like it. So this is kind of what you're aiming towards. Life will get in the way, that's okay. It's trying to understand, okay, how can I kind of make things easier for myself in life to kind of hit some of these goals? And if you can identify things that are causing you to maybe not hit these goals, you can overcome them then. That's the basics of it. And, you know, I think there's a very tangible benefit to nailing your nutrition because research shows us that if you kind of adhere to these principles, you perform better, you run further, you run faster, even cognitively. So your mental function just works better, and that helps your decision making in the game, and it'll bleed over into other aspects of your life as well.
Without doubt. So again, huge thank you to Masterplus by Messi for sponsoring this video. We hope you got plenty of value from it. We will have our detailed article from Patrick, which will outline everything that we've discussed here, but in more detail. That's going to be in the description. So we would heavily advise you go and read that. It's free access. Go watch it, or read it, should I say, after watching this video. And obviously, if you enjoyed and you don't subscribe already, we'd really appreciate it if you could hit the subscribe button, like, comment, leave any questions in here. Patrick, I'm sure, will monitor the comments, as will we, and we'll help with any further questions that you may have. So thank you again. Thank you for watching. We really appreciate it.